Welcome to I Just Have to Say Something, a conservative Hispanic perspective where we audit police and civilian interactions, provide responsible civilian and gun owners information on making safe choices, and promote responsible gun ownership by providing lessons learned from real police and defensive encounters caught on camera. Help me beat the algorithms by hitting that like, subscribe, and that notification bell. Massad Ayoob from Wilson Combat is an expert in the gun industry. He's been around for decades and is a well-known name for anybody who's been shooting for any amount of time. If you're new in the industry or if you're new at guns and getting interested in guns, look up his videos. He is an extraordinarily good speaker and writer and has a wealth of education and that will keep you out of trouble. Let's dive into his video.
Hey gang, Massad Ayoob here for the Wilson Combat Channel. We're in Berryville, Arkansas, and in front of me is the latest Wilson Combat pistol, the SFT9, with a 15-round magazine. And it kind of typifies today's topic. We listen carefully to the comments that we get on the Wilson Combat Channel, and one we get frequently is, how important is capacity? The answer really is, today, it's more important than ever. In the early 1970s, when they first pinned a badge on me, the standard police loadout, if you will, was a 6-shot revolver and 12 spare cartridges, and that was it. Well, time has moved on. Today, the old service revolver has gone from the police armory into the police museum. Today, your standard loadout for a uniformed officer is probably going to be an 18-shot 9mm semi-automatic pistol. Just in the gun, the entire loadout their grandfather would have had in 1972 or 1975. Typically, 2 spare magazines, so with 9mm counting the round in the chamber, instead of 18 rounds carried on duty, we're talking 52. And a whole lot of departments are authorizing a third 17-round magazine, so you do the math. The plainclothes officers and the general public carrying concealed handguns legally, we're seeing the 10, 12, 15-round 9mm becoming the pistol of choice. Is that following a trend? We've all heard the statement that the perception is the reality. In this case, I think the reality drives the perception, and here's why. In the decades since third quarter of the 20th century to today, we've seen more cases of, across the criminal spectrum, gangs where there used to be 1 or 2 perpetrators. It used to be a typical home invasion was one lone nutcase kicking in the front door. And if you see some of the atrocities that have been memorialized that you can find on YouTube from people's Ring cameras and surveillance cameras, now we're having multiple armed people making those entries. We're seeing flash mob crimes. We're seeing more than ever street protests turning into street riots and breaking out in gunfire. The carjacker isn't just the one guy with a knife coming up to your window now, it's multiple armed opponents. There are other things that as well that have driven the switch to guns that have more onboard firepower and of course reload more rapidly. We see today more bad guys wearing concealed body armor than in the time of John Dillinger. And body armor is going to soak up a few bullets before you realize this isn't working, I've got to aim somewhere else to stop this particular threat. We're seeing more bad guys than ever who understand movement and cover, and the surveillance videos of the gunfights show that. Go back a few years ago to the monster who murdered 5 police officers in Dallas, Texas, and watch the surveillance video as he outflanks and murders a police officer by basically getting and filleting the officer's cover. We're seeing more bad guys than ever on drugs, and that can have an effect on stopping power. And all these stopping power debates, the reason they'll never be resolved is it's not just in the gun or the bullet. A whole lot of it is in the body of the offender. Let's say you've got somebody on cocaine. Where does cocaine give you its rush? The epinephrine release creates some degree of superhuman strength, and along with that comes the release of the norepinephrines, the body's natural painkillers, which means this guy is energized enough and resistant enough to pain that he can absorb a whole lot more trauma than his predecessors or than he might have in an unaltered state. If we look at the opiate drugs, now heroin is concentrated morphine at the risk of oversimplification, and you get a heroin junkie who's recently fixed and has a high tolerance. Don't be surprised that he's not falling down screaming from the pain because he's been shot a couple of times. And today we have fentanyl, which, again, without too much exaggeration, is heroin on steroids. Even the individual on alcohol, they don't call it feeling no pain for nothing. Ethanol is a remarkably effective general anesthetic. So with all these things, more bad guys, more mobile bad guys who know how to take cover, more bad guys who are wearing body armor that can absorb the rounds, we can see why in both the police sector and the armed citizen sector, there has been a trend toward a sidearm that has more rounds on board and can be quickly reloaded if that becomes necessary. It concerns me that so many states have gone with 10-round magazine limits, given the fact that the only people who are going to obey those limits are the law-abiding, the potential victims. For the bad guys, the illegal assault high-capacity magazine, which I still can't say with a straight face, as you can see, is going to be the first thing that's plea bargained away anyway.
Now, some people have asked me in the past, how can I be Hispanic and be a conservative? How can I be a Republican? And one thing that I've learned over time, just through observation, is that Democrats and liberals tend to be much more harsh on the law-abiding and on the innocent than they are on criminals. Think about that for a minute.
But for you, the private citizen, inadvertently carrying a 15-round magazine in a 10-round state such as New York, each of those more than 10-round magazines is a felony count in and of itself. And it won't be plea bargained away because it's the only thing they've got against you, and there's no lesser included offense.
So let's get this straight. A carjacker with a Glock with an extended 32-round magazine or a drum magazine gets his high-capacity magazine charge dropped because obviously he's a criminal and he deserves some leniency. And you, as the law-abiding citizen that hasn't done a thing, somehow gets picked out of a crowd and they find out that you have a Glock 19 with a 15-round magazine and you are a felon and you will go to jail. Now tell me, what sense does that make? The liberal hive mind, it is so twisted and upside down that I just can't even begin to wrap my head around it. Soft on crime, hard on the innocent that want to protect themselves and their loved ones. I just can't even begin to wrap my head around that.
I don't like it any better than you, but that's the reality. I hope you live in one of the states where you can arm yourself effectively. Follow the model of American law enforcement. Carry enough ammunition. In the old days, we heard some of the old head cops say, if you can't do it with 6, you can't do it at all. History has proven that more is better. The old saying that the only time you can have too much ammunition is if you're drowning or on fire is probably absolutely true once the shooting starts.
Remember, you have an individual right to protect yourself. When you look at your community and you see crime out of control and it's a revolving door justice system, you can change your community by looking at who you're voting for. Don't blindly vote one way or another. Take the time and get the people that are going to protect you and your community and make it safer. One thing before I go, I am not affiliated with Wilson Combat in any way other than being a customer, and they make wonderful products. Look them up on the internet. You won't be disappointed. Make sure to carry safely and legally, and always be ready to defend yourself and those that you love. Thank you for visiting. Please like and subscribe and share this video.